Without further ado, please give it up for Ryan Bellerose.
Hi. So Dave asked me to come here and speak, and I was more than happy to do that. I guess I'll start really by talking about why I kind of got started doing this stuff. It might be a little bit of a shock to some of you, because I know some people tell me they're like, Ryan, why do you do this? It doesn't make any sense. But I hope that after I talk to you for a little while, you'll understand that it makes perfect sense. Okay? So the way it all started, the way all of this for me really got started was when I was a little kid. I was one of those kids that likes to read a lot. So I'm from a place called Paddle Prairie in Alberta. And I can see some of the confused looks on your faces. Don't feel bad. Nobody knows where Paddle Prairie is except the people that live there. So easiest way for me to explain it is that it's in the far, far north of a province called Alberta. So it's about as far north as you can go and still be in Alberta. What that really means is that it gets really cold. So I actually just talked to my dad the other day. I called him and he said to me, just so you know, yeah, that's the short story. Yeah. So I called, yeah, it's summer, it is, it's really nice here. So my dad actually said to me, he's like, yep, minus 32. And I was like, sweet. And I was like, it's like 16, dude, I'm wearing shorts. And he just laughed because, you know, that's how we roll up there, it gets cold. So anyways, growing up there is like kind of a different kind of way of growing up. So I grew up, this is before there was television. I know it sounds really funny for somebody my age to say this, but we didn't have power, we didn't have running water. Well, we kind of had running water. We had Ryan run and get water. So, literally, like if you read the blog, you'll actually see that my tagline is, I thought my name was go get water. So literally, my dad wanted to make tea, Ryan, go get water. Ryan ran down the hill with a bucket, came back up the hill with water. What that meant was that I grew up in a very different kind of age. Like I grew up where we spent time reading, we spent time examining things. The pace of life up there is quite different. So in the wintertime, if it was really, really cold, and by really cold, I don't mean minus 30 or minus 40, I mean like minus 52 or minus 60 with the wind chill, then you don't go outside that much, right? You cover up, because if you have exposed skin for longer than 15 seconds, you'll get frostbite. So you learn to go to the bathroom really fast, because there's outhouses. You don't go to the bathroom in the house. So, you know, you grow up in this kind of an environment, you learn how to think about things. You learn how to look at a problem and examine it. You don't just, you know, like modern day people, you have a tendency to watch YouTube videos. So if it's not within 2 minutes or 3 minutes, you're already moving on to the next video. I grew up from a generation that actually read books. And sometimes I'll talk to kids nowadays and they look at me kind of funny, like, you read books? And I'm like, yeah, I like books, you know, because I learned from these things. So one of the first things I ever read was an encyclopedia. And everyone looks at me and they're like, yeah, you don't look like the kind of guy that reads encyclopedias. But the truth of the matter is I used to read a lot. So when I was quite small, I should bring that up too. I'm not small anymore. Growing up, I was really small. So I guess what kind of happened was I would read these stories in the encyclopedia, and then you have to remember that in my people, we were all forcefully converted, right? So the Métis people didn't choose to become Christians. We were forcefully converted by a government that decided they didn't want us to be natives anymore. So I come from a generation that is maybe 2 generations removed from the people that were actually forcefully removed from their homes and forcefully converted. So we learned Christianity. So every Sunday we had Sunday school. We'd all bundle up, go to the church, read the Bible. And so, I mean, but for me, the Bible was less about a religious document and more about a historical document. I used to read it as the stories. I thought that, you know, some of the stories were amazing stories. And when you're a little kid who's growing up in the middle of nowhere and you're reading stories about these, you know, like David and Goliath, that's the classic one. I mean, a little shepherd boy killed a giant with a rock. You know, like, to me, that story was what became important, the story itself. It wasn't so much the details, but the story itself. So you combine that with the fact that all of a sudden one day I'm reading the encyclopedia and I got to the section on the Israeli War of Independence. And so I guess I'll have to break away for a second so you understand me a little better. My people fought a war of independence, only we lost, right? So it's all right. Yeah, I get kind of wussy about that. We fought in 1870, we fought the Canadian government. We declared a state of our own, and we said, look, we're not Canadians. We are not living on Canadian land. We are staying in the Red River. We talked to the Native people in the area, and they saw what was coming, and they decided that they would throw their lot in with us, and that we would create a state of our own. So we went to the Canadian government, and they basically said, no, you're Indians, you're clearly not capable of looking after yourselves, and if you declare a state of your own, we will declare war. We didn't think they would. So our leaders got together and said, okay, you know what? The Canadian government's pretty mellow, they're pretty good people. We'll just declare our state, and we think that they'll back down and they'll say, okay, well now there's a state and we'll talk about it. We declared a state, they declared war. So, long story short, we lost. And what they did was they displaced us because the Canadian government is, at the time, was still very British. And the British have this thing where they're very careful when they colonize, and they learned some lessons from other places that they colonized. And what they learned was that if you displace a people, they're much less likely to revolt. So what they did was they moved us. They didn't move us far. I mean, in relative terms, 1,000 kilometers, it doesn't seem that far. So they moved us, and that's that part of the story. So we lost our revolt. So I want everybody to understand that, just so you can understand where I'm coming from afterwards. Now, after this, like the revolt, what happened was my family went to a place called St. Albert. And St. Albert is in the center of the province of Alberta. It's a beautiful place. If you ever get a chance to go there, I definitely suggest you do. It's right in the foothills of the mountains, beautiful green. It's nothing like where we live now. I mean, in the wintertime, sometimes it might get to be minus 30. So it's, but in the summertime, it's much warmer, and the summer lasts longer than 3 months. So it's a pretty nice place. We lived there for about a generation, and then the government came again, and they had heard that there were some people that were making rumblings because, again, we were way far away from Canada. Some of us started thinking, hey, maybe we should have the state of our own, and the government heard about this and immediately came, and what they did was they actually showed up one day, and they told all of these people. Now keep in mind, these are not, like, everybody thinks of Indians as people wearing loincloths and chasing the buffalo. Métis people were already living in towns, right? They were already pretty much, I wouldn't say assimilated, they were integrated. They were kind of like the Jews in the 1930s, right? They were part of society, maybe a distinct part, but they were still part of society. Government shows up and says, everybody has 24 hours to load whatever you can load in a wagon and get the hell out of your house. Anybody that's still in your house, when we come back, we're gonna kill. So we already had a really bad experience with the Canadian government, so we believed them. So my family in particular loaded everything up, and my family in particular is one of those families that was very successful. So they had a very difficult time to figure out what they're gonna throw in the wagon. But they threw everything in the wagon and they went north to get away. Now, we were lucky because we still had friends and relatives among the other Native people there, which are the Cree. So we survived. But there were a lot of families from that community that were kicked out of their homes in the middle of winter that didn't survive. They froze or they starved. I mean, that's the history, right? So, so you get this, so we understand like the whole idea of refugees, and we understand genocide. Like we get it. Sorry. So when I talk to people about this stuff, it's important for them to understand, like, I know I'm kind of rambling here, but I'm going to slowly get to a point, believe me. My people have gone through some pretty horrible things, right? The thing is, we went through some pretty horrible things in a place where everybody looked and said, hey, Canada is this wonderful utopian place where the government loves everyone and everybody's happy, and Canadians are polite. We say sorry if we bump into somebody. That's what we're known for. And yet, I come from a country too where there is actual apartheid. I come from a country where there are two distinct laws for two peoples. Every Indian in Canada is governed by a thing called the Indian Act. Now, the Indian Act is this legislation that was put in place by the British that basically tells Indians how to live their lives. Everyone else in Canada, and by everyone else, I literally mean everyone that's not an Indian, is governed by British common law that turned into Canadian common law. So you end up with a disparity here because people like me, until I guess like 1969, I believe, I couldn't leave the res in 1969 to go to work. I had to have a piece of paper that was basically a hall pass that said, hey, Ryan Bellerose can leave the res to go to work, don't arrest him. If I didn't have that and I went to work, anybody could walk up to me, take me to jail, and say this guy was off the res. So, I mean, these are things that people don't really realize. Until the 1930s, you could actually kill a Métis person. I'm not joking. You can go and look it up. You could murder a Métis person, and there would be no repercussions legally until the 1930s. So, this is Canada, right? And this is the place that everybody thinks is this wonderful utopian country. So when I talk about this kind of stuff, I want you guys to understand that I get it. Like, I know where you're coming from. I know the problems that you went through. I know what it's like to be a persecuted minority. I mean, pale skin aside, I mean, I know who I am, right? So I guess, so that's the, now that I went with the downer stuff, we'll go a little bit more back to where the good stuff was. So what happened for me that really changed everything after I read all these books and I had these stories for about 10 years, I had absolutely no contact because I'm sure as you guys are aware, this is a guy from up north wearing shorts. Jews don't like the cold. There's no Jews where I live. So I was 20 years old before I met the first Jewish person that I knew was Jewish, right? The funniest part was it took me almost a year to figure out they were Jewish because they never talked about it. So basically, I was talking to a friend of mine earlier and I was explaining to her, because she asked me, like, how did you get started doing this? So how I really started to get doing this was, and I'm going to talk to this because this is important for all of you to know, it was a relationship. It was a friendship. I started doing this stuff because I went to university and I met this girl. And she was just a friend of mine. She was actually a really good friend of the girl I was dating at the time. And we used to go to her house on Friday nights and we'd eat chicken and drink, have chicken soup. And I never really paid attention to it. I just thought they were really good at making chicken. And, no, seriously, like, I know it sounds ridiculous, but this is what I honestly thought. They never talked about religion. They never preached at me. They never ever brought up, how they had their relationship with the Creator, any of that stuff. It was just pretty much everybody would get together. They'd play board games. It was a really cool thing coming from a place like where I was from to see other people that did stuff like that, because all of a sudden you got to remember this is well into the TV era now, and everybody else that I knew just kind of sat around watching TV. These people did stuff together on a Friday night. Like, it was really cool. So I used to really enjoy going there. So flash forward about maybe 6 or 7 months, and I went to university, this place called the University of Alberta. Now it's in one of the bigger cities. It's in the center of the province. In the wintertime, it only gets to be about -40 sometimes, so it's nicer. And there's a big stadium there. And in the stadium, they built it for the Olympics in like the 1970s, right? The last time anything important happened in Alberta. And so they have the stadium, and they have it, the way it's built is like a big donut. And around the outside of the donut are all these different classrooms. They turn them into classrooms and locker rooms. So the football locker room, literally, you walk in the front door, right? And as you walk in the front door, you turn right, and there's maybe 10 feet. We'll say 10 feet. And there's a lot. The first door is the football team's locker room. Now, at the U of A, they were kind of one of those schools where they try and nickel and dime you. So everybody that had a locker had to pay a fee to have a locker. And so the sports player, like anybody that was an athlete there, we were like, well, I don't want to pay that extra money for a locker. I have a football locker, and it's right in the middle of the campus, so I'll just put my stuff there. So that's what I did. I had all my books in my locker room. So one day, I'm running late. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever been a scholarship participant at a university, but if you're on an academic scholarship and you're an athletic scholarship, any of those kinds of things, they watch your attendance very carefully. Now, if you're an athlete and you're already a bit of a troublemaker, they watch you very carefully. So I knew that I couldn't really afford to be late for class. So I'm walking really quickly to get to my books, and I can still remember like it was yesterday. It's so ridiculous, some of the things you remember. I open the door, and my friend Di is right behind me. She's like maybe 2 feet behind me. And I walk really slowly normally, but I do have long legs. So when I want to walk fast, I walk fast. I open the door and I turn, and there's this cardboard wall. And it's all painted like a brick wall, and it's got bullet holes in it and like bloody handprints. It was like, so I literally stop and I look at it. And okay, so I apologize because I know this is a house of God and stuff, but I have to use the language I actually used. So I was like, what the fuck? And I was literally like, and I turned to my friend and I'm like, are you seeing this? And she looks at me and her eyes get like really big. And at the time, like, this still bothers me because I didn't figure out what she was going through. I was so wrapped up in being pissed off because this was in my way. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, nah, this is no good. So I walk over and there's 3 people. There was a little white guy wearing a scarf, and I know now that the scarf is called the keffiyeh, and I know what it symbolizes. At the time, I just thought it was a really retarded-looking scarf. And he walks over, and he goes like this. He stands in front of me, and he's like, "You can't go here." And I, like, okay, so in those days, I was significantly bigger. I was actually much most of my weight now has gone downwards. It used to be more upwards. But I was also significantly less mellow, I guess. So I looked at him and I'm like, "You're joking, right?" And he's like, "No, you can't go here." And then this girl, a white girl, she steps in front of me. Now, I don't have a problem with girls. I like girls. But she stands in front of me and she goes, "You have to walk all the way around." And I look at her and I'm like, "Yeah, it's not going to happen." And she's like, "No, you have to understand. This is how Palestinians feel." And I'm looking at her and I'm like, I don't give a shit about the Palestinians. Like, what are you even talking about? Like, what does this have to do with anything? Now I'm getting kind of irritated, right? She's pissing me off. And then she starts lecturing me about oppression. And I'm like in shock, because I'm like, wait a second. Is a white person with blonde hair and blue eyes lecturing an Indian about oppression? I was much darker at the time, too. So now I'm in full-on shock mode. And so I turn to my friend to say something like, "Are you watching this shit?" And I turn, and she's just like, she's kind of backing up, and she doesn't really, But now, so like I said, I was less mellow in my college years. So now I walk over, and I'm like, okay, here's the deal. You guys are either going to move this out of my way so I can get to class on time, or I'm going to move it. If I move it, I can't really guarantee it's not going to get wrecked. And I was trying to be, that was me being reasonable. I mean, that's 20-year-old Ryan saying, "Hey, work with me here." So the worst part about it was then the third person, I found out later, was an Arab guy. But at the time, I just thought it was a dude with a beard. And he was like pretty tall. He was about the same size as me, but he was older. He didn't look like anybody that would be in university. Like, he looked like he was probably about 40 maybe, but he was like an older guy. So, and he was pretty tall. So he walks over and stands beside the runty guy. And the runty guy now is like, he's doing the face to chest thing. And I'm like getting kind of really annoyed. So at this point, I said to him, I'm like, okay, so I'm going to count to 5. And when I get to 5, I'm going to my locker. Now the thing is, where I'm from, and I hope you guys don't understand, like, don't think too badly of us. We have a tendency, like, my mom used to say when I was a little kid, use your words. My dad would say, punch them. It is, and I'm not gonna lie, that was going through my head. So I was like, so what I did was I looked the taller guy, because I felt like a bully looking at the little guy, because I was literally like looming, and I'm pretty good at looming. So I look at the taller guy, but I stared him in the eye, and I admit, like, okay, so take your glasses off so you understand a little better. Now I don't look so nerdy. So I stare him in the eye and I go, 1, 2, 3. And he's like, now I could see it. I could see him literally starting to kind of back up a little bit. And then I go, 5. As soon as I said 5, now in my mind, I swear to God, I still remember it as I brushed him aside. I maintained fully that I literally just went like this, like, excuse me, and I'm walking past. My friend that actually told me about it afterwards, because I had a friend on the basketball team that was standing there watching the whole thing and laughing, he says that I backhanded the guy in the chest, and, like, I guess I sent him flying a little bit. I still think, though, that I just pushed him. So after I pushed him, then I realized now I'm mad. Like, I realize that I'm mad. So I look at him while he's sitting on the ground, and I'm like, you did this. And then I grab a stupid wall, and I tore it, because I was really upset. Like, this at this point now, like, and I'm one of those people that when I get upset, I make myself more upset, and it just kind of rolls. They had this stupid table with a bunch of posters and a bunch of other stuff on it, So then after I ripped the wall, I could have just went to my locker, but no. I turned and walked back to their table, and I flipped their table over, and then I kicked it. Because I was, at this point, I'm like, lost my cool, right? And they had this box, and this is the worst part. I actually felt somewhat guilty about this, but not really. And they had this box full of pamphlets and stuff. That was the swag they were handing out. So I walked over, and I kicked their box over, and now the box is like there's pamphlets scattered everywhere. So the guy's still sitting on the ground, and now I start kicking their pamphlets around on the ground, and he's still on the ground, and I'm looking at him while I'm doing it, because like I wanted him to get up. I really did. I was hoping he wouldn't, and Anyway, so after all that, then I go walking to my locker. Now, I'm so wound up that I completely forgot about everybody else in the world. All I was thinking about was these people have made me angry, and now they have to pay. I go to my locker, I come back, I grab my books, and I walk outside of my locker, and I look to where the field hockey team's locker rooms are. I look, there's nobody there. I was like, what the hell? So I walk over, and I rattle the door, because I don't know the passcode. We all had passcodes. And I don't know, and I'm like, well, there's nobody in there. I'll just get to class or I'm gonna be late. Because by this time I realized, okay, now I have to actually jog a little bit, didn't like that. So I get to class, I sit down, I look, my friend's nowhere to be found. And I'm like, man, she's gonna be late, and she's gonna get in shit. Put my stuff down, I go sit through the whole class. She gets about halfway through the class, she walks in, she sits down behind me, quiet, doesn't talk to me or anything. We finish class, prof leaves. I turn around and I go, dude, like what the hell? I got rid of that stupid wall, why don't you just come with me? She looks at me and she says, I'm Jewish. And I was like, what the hell does that have to do with anything, And seriously, I didn't even know that. And she looks at me and she goes, no, I'm serious. Like, I'm Jewish. And I'm like, I'm serious. I don't care. And she's like, you never notice, like, on Fridays you come over to my house and we're having Shabbat dinner? You never resonated with you? And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't even notice that. And then she says, I'm just really uncomfortable with what happened today. And I'm like, why the hell would you be uncomfortable? I didn't wreck your wall. And she was just like, she looks at me like I'm an idiot. And I understand now, like now I get it. Because then she says, you're 6'4" and you're 300 pounds. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cool. I like being big. Like at the time, especially, I was like, this is awesome. And she's like, no, Ryan, like I'm not, and you're not always around. And that's when it kind of hit me. I'm like, well, why would you be scared? Like we're in Canada on school, it's university, nothing's gonna happen. And she goes, those people every day for the last week have been at the campus handing out pamphlets. And on those pamphlets, it talks about my people, and it talks about wanting to kill my people. It talks about wanting to steal my people's land. And she was like, really, and then she started crying, right? And I felt like shit, because I was like, all this was going on. And I mean, I like to think of myself as a fairly sensitive person. I pay attention. I know what's going on around me. But this whole time, this stuff was happening, and I didn't even see it. I saw it like nothing. I was so wound up in my own world that I didn't even notice that this was happening to a friend of mine, somebody that I was close to, right? So literally, I go home that night, and I felt terrible. Like I wasn't even really sure what to do. And then I'm worried that, maybe what I did was going to make things worse, right? Like maybe by ripping the wall down and pissing those people off, maybe it's going to, reflect on her. Like maybe they're going to start picking on other Jewish people that I don't even know, right? Like then all of a sudden it's like this whole world opens up that I had no idea even existed. And I was concerned that maybe the stuff that I did, that I totally thought it was within my rights to do, maybe that's going to impact other people, right? So anyways, the next day I go to school, and the dean calls me in his office. And I knew it was coming. I mean, you don't just wreck people's stuff without some kind of repercussion, even if it's dumb stuff. So I get in his office, I sit down, and he's like, hey Ryan, I got to talk to you about this stuff. He goes, here's the deal. He goes, those kids are idiots. He's like, we know they're idiots, but we can't do anything about it. He's like, they're not breaking the university rules. Oh, by the way, I found out later that they actually are. But he said at the time, they're not breaking the university's rules. They have the right to protest, blah, 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 blah. He goes, so here's the deal. He goes, just don't wreck their stuff. He's like, I don't care if you tell them off. I don't care if you yell at them. He goes, but you can't be physical with them. you know, like, we're gonna have to suspend you for a day because you knocked a person over. And I was like, I didn't knock him over, I just kind of brushed him. And he was like, somebody said he flew like 6 feet. I was like, I maintained that I brushed him. So, but, you know, after all of that stuff, this is where it kind of goes a little bit, you know, it gets a little bit lighter again, because I go home, right? And so anybody that follows me on social media knows that I have a dad that's an interesting fellow. He's an interesting character. So I go home for the weekend, and I'm telling my dad about what happened. I was like, yeah, you know, I saw this stupid wall, and then I told him I lost my temper, and he's like, so what did you learn? And I'm like, I learned I'm not supposed to lose my temper. And he's like, okay, but what would you do next time differently? And I'm like, not a goddamn thing. And he looks at me and he's like, good. You know? So at the end of the day, you know, I realized my dad, he got it. He understood. He's like, you know what? Sometimes you just got to stand up. And he understood right away when I was talking about this, that there are times when you just got to stand up. You got to do something that maybe it's outside of your comfort zone, right? And I'm not going to lie, being physical with somebody that makes me mad is not outside of my comfort zone. But, you know, getting involved in something political that I had absolutely, at the time, no real investment in, that was a little bit outside of my comfort zone. But they made the mistake of attacking one of my friends, and they made the mistake of getting in my way. So there's a combination of things there. There's a combination of dynamics at play, right? One of the dynamics is that they were picking on a friend of mine, and even though at the time I didn't even know about it, when I did find out about it and when I realized what was going on, I was more motivated to do something. Well, how they started it all was they did something that pissed me off, right? They got in my way, they irritated me, they did something that was just not cool. So what happened from there was I started getting more involved politically. I started, you know, writing articles in university. I'd start talking to people. I started going to all the pro-Israel events, and not just pro-Israel events, but like most minority stuff. I started being that guy. I was the annoying guy that when somebody said something that was bullshit, I would say bullshit. And everybody hates that guy. I mean, on social media, nobody likes when they post something and it's not factual, and somebody is like, that's not factual, you should check into that. Nobody likes that guy. I mean, I don't like that guy because I hate when I make a mistake and post something that's not factual. So I started doing all that, and then I started getting more and more involved. And then for a couple more years, I got out of university, I started working. Right? Everybody here can sympathize with that. I mean, this is probably the part of the issue that we actually have with the lack of really solid pro-Israel advocates, is that Jewish kids go to university, they get their degree, they get out, they go to work. It's done, right? Sometimes they take 3 years to get a 4-year degree. Sometimes they take 4 years to get a 5-year degree. But what they do is they compress everything, they get out of school, they do it quickly. They're motivated, they want to get the hell out of school. The other side, and this is what I learned from debating them when they introduced the guy debating me as a 7th-year political science student. and then everybody got mad at me when I was like, 7-year political science? Like, I repeated it because I was like, that's not that long of a degree. 7 years, you should be a lawyer. You know? So, you know, like, that's when I started realizing the other side doesn't have any of these kinds of compunctions, right? So, meanwhile, we're telling young Jewish kids, get your degree, get out of school, get into the workforce, get successful, right? They're telling people, go to school, get involved, get visible. There's the difference. So you end up with this disparity on campuses now where you have these people going to these campuses and talking, and they're very charismatic and they're very involved. They go to everybody's events because they're only taking 2 classes a semester. They have time, right? They go to everybody's events. I mean, you haven't seen ridiculous until you've seen a group of Muslims go to the gay and lesbian event and talk about solidarity. Like, you haven't seen true ridiculous until you see Palestinians at a Native event talking about colonialism. Like, you literally look at them and you're like, yeah, you guys are pretty much colonists, you know that, right? And they're like, no. It's like, yeah, in the 7th century, you know, when you conquered the entire known world, colonizers, and they get really upset. They're like, no, we were just spreading Islam. And it's like, but you weren't doing it very gently. Like, you were conquering people, and then you were colonizing them, and you were forcing them to take their religion, you were forcing them to change their language. I mean, that's what colonization is. And then they would look at me like I'm the jerk, right? They're like, why would you say that? And it's like, because it's true, right? So one of the things that I do now is when I talk to people about advocacy and about being involved, I tell them, look, so I'm a pretty smart guy. I've learned a lot of things. I'm not stupid. So I've learned 3 things that I consider to be the most important things that anybody should know. 1, know how to tell a story. Because your biggest problem as Jews, and I hate to say this, some people get really upset at me, and I'm sorry if I offend you, but it's the truth. You have this amazing story, right? It might be the most amazing story in the world. I'm not kidding. It's a brilliant, brilliant story. It's one of those stories that you can't write it. You can't make this stuff up. People won't believe you. But you can tell the story, and that's what you have forgotten to do. You not only have you forgotten, it's like you've forgotten how. So you have this brilliant, brilliant story that people will connect with on an emotional level, and then you tell it like a monkey with a crayon. It's horrible. And so you end up with like these situations, where you get these people coming, and I'm sorry, but I was actually at an event when this happened. Palestinian guy, holds up a picture with a dead child, right? Every single person that I know sees a dead child, and they immediately, there's a switch that flips, and you don't care, it's not a real picture, that came from like Syria, not Gaza, this on an intellectual level, but you see a dead child, and the switch gets flipped. Nobody likes to see it, it's horrible, it's horrific to see. But what's really horrific is then the pro-Israel guy was literally standing next to him with a poster about computer chips. And I remember actually talking to the guy after, and my friends got really mad at me. They were like, man, you were really mean to that guy. Like, he's got a good heart. And I was like, dude, if they're talking about dead babies and your response is, but we have really good computer chips, I think you have Asperger's. And he's like, well, that's a really mean thing to say. I know people with Asperger's. I'm like, yeah, and what's the common denominator? They don't understand human feelings. Like, human feelings are the important thing here. We're like, don't get bogged down in the argument. And the worst thing was, because my friend's Jewish, you guys have this idea that lots of words is better than a little bit of words. And it's kind of funny because lots of words has its place, right? When you have a group of people that are already engaged, they're already knowledgeable, they want to be involved, lots of words is gonna engage them. They're gonna say, hey, that's an article, I want to read that, and I want to know more. But if you're trying to engage like a college kid, or you're trying to engage somebody that's not really involved in this conflict, you give them a whole pile of words and they see wall of text and they immediately disconnect. But if you give them a picture with a couple words, they'll see it and it engages. It engages the switches, flips them, and then they see it and they're like, hey, yeah, that makes sense. So like the coolest thing that I've ever made, in my opinion, I've written some pretty good articles, and Dave can tell you, some of them are pretty good. I give myself a little pat on the back. And like I did the research for them. I spent the time. But the thing that I'm most proud of is a meme. I made a meme that went viral in like 24 hours. All it is a picture of a friend of mine, a girl, kissing the wall in Jerusalem. And there's just a couple words on it. And it says, they kept telling us Jews go home, so we did. Right? So, yeah. I hope you're clapping for the meme, because it's badass. So that meme went viral in a span of like 2 days. And the reason it went viral is because people saw it and they're like, wow, that makes sense, right? And the coolest part was on my own wall, I have a lot of friends that I play football with. I have friends that have no investment in any kind of politics. I have Native friends from the res. I have like this really diverse group. It's kind of funny because if you put them all in a room, they would literally be little groups of people. They would not intermingle. And I saw people from almost every single one of those groups sharing that meme because the meme resonated. The meme was like, wow, that kind of flips a switch for everybody. And that's kind of why, like, when I talk about advocacy, one of the important things is that we have to start being more intelligent about the way we do things. So that brings me to number 2. First, we have storytelling, which is learn how to tell the story. Number 2, learn how to tailor the delivery of the message. Don't tailor the message. The problem that Jewish people have is they have another problem. Sorry, you guys have a lot of problems. But you have this idea that you have to change the message according to the audience. You cannot do that, because every single time you change the message, you send the idea out that the message is not legit, right? the message has to remain consistent, it has to remain focused, and it has to be the same message. You tailor the delivery of the message. So when I'm talking to like university kids or younger people, I talk a lot more like when I'm on the res. I'll even throw in a few swears. Like today I tried to really moderate my language, right? But like when I'm talking to young people, I talk the way I talk. When I'm talking to young people, I tell different stories. I tell stories about like this one time when I peed on a bear's head, and that's an actual story, for real. But I mean, like, I'll tell stories that they will get, that they will understand. When I'm talking to a different audience, I will tell different stories, but they all have the same message, right? And at the end of the day, that's the second most important thing. The third most important thing is to realize we're the good guys, right? We are the good guys. No, I love this thing my dad says, and he's such an idiot sometimes, but he's one of those people that says really dumb things that end up turning out really wise. He said, Ryan, I was thinking about this the other day. No good guy ever woke up in the morning and said, hey, today I think I'm going to go try and kill some Jews. Yeah, seriously. Like, no good guy in the history of the world ever woke up and said that. And yet, we forget that we're the good guys. Like, I'm not going on a tour like Steven Salaida or any of those guys making like 50 grand. I basically came here to talk to Stand With Us to try and help them figure out how to be more effective on social media. That was the original intent of this trip, because Stand With Us is a really great group. They realize there's an issue with social media. They have a really great social media coordinator. They have some very good people, and they have good resources. They put a bunch of us in a room. We came up with some different campaigns, and we're going to make a difference, right? That's why I originally came here. So I'm not coming here to make a pile of money. I mean, I'm coming here because I think this is the right thing to do. Now, every single person in this room can make a difference, and I know I'm not going to be one of those rah-rah people, but you make a difference by using the talents you have, right? So some people might be really talented on Twitter. I'm not so much, because 140 letters, sometimes it's difficult to get your thoughts across, right? Some people are amazing photographers. I mean, I've been traveling with my friend Brian. We've been taking pictures all over the place. And like the thing that resonates with my friends in Canada that aren't Jewish, they have no investment in this struggle at all, I showed them a picture of Judea and Samaria, and they were just like, wow, like that's beautiful, dude. I show them, okay, so this is Hoot. So I show people, excuse me, the pictures of Hoot and they laugh, but the truth of the matter is, it's actually something that was completely not meant to be any kind of Hasbara. This is a friend of mine's little girl, loves to read books, and she loves to travel, and she wants to travel really badly, and she's 7, so she couldn't tag along in the suitcase. So I bought this owl, and I told her I'm going to take this owl with me everywhere I go, and I'm going to take pictures with Owlie. I thought his name was Owlie, but apparently it's Hoot. And so I take pictures of him in all these random places. So Hoot so far has been to the Western Wall. He's been all over Judea and Samaria. He's been to Zikron. He's been to several different museums. And every time I go somewhere, I take a picture with Hoot. Now, what's happened is that some of my friends who have never thought about Israel in any kind of way, shape, or form, they read my posts and they'll roll their eyes and they'll be like, oh, Ryan's talking about the Jews. But then every now and then, they'll like a post or they'll share it, which is really kind of cool. But all of a sudden, I'm traveling to these places that are really political, and people are sharing the post because there's a picture of a stuffed owl, right? And I talk all the time about, if you support the rights of the Jewish people, and I do because you are an Indigenous people, even though some of you may not realize it, when you support the rights of Indigenous people, you can't do it like in a half-assed way. You have to literally support the rights of Indigenous people. So if I say, your rights to be here have absolutely nothing to do with external forces. So your rights to be here have nothing to do with the United Nations. Your rights to be here have nothing to do with Europe. It has nothing to do with the Holocaust. I mean, people will try to delegitimize your right to be here by saying those things, those exact things. Your rights to be here are because this is your ancestral land. Your rights to live here have nothing to do with anything external, right? And it's really important for you to understand that. Almost as important for you to understand that, look, people will tell you that you're only a good Jew if you live here. You go 20 kilometers that way, now you're a bad Jew, right? They do the same thing to my people. Okay, you know what, Ryan, if you live on the res, you're a good Indian. Oh, yeah, you're not supposed to leave the res. Now you're a bad Indian. So it's really important for Jewish people to understand, look, like, your indigenous rights don't change. They don't change because you live in Efrat, right? They don't change because you live in Har Homa in Jerusalem. Like, these are both places where people talk about, oh, those are the settlements, and all of a sudden those people don't matter, right? No, your rights as indigenous people are to live on your ancestral land and to have self-determination there. Those rights are inalienable rights. No matter what anybody tells you, those rights are your rights. Now, your identity is tied in with those rights because your identity is tied in with being Jewish. Being Jewish, and I know this is going to be another crazy thing I'm saying, but being Jewish is not just about a religion. It's not just about ethnicity. It's not just about nationality. It's about all of these different things. You're a tribal people who came from a very specific place, and your identity had its genesis in that place. So all of the rights that you have stem from that. Now, we can talk about religious arguments, we can talk about political arguments. Those are all, you can find those arguments anywhere. The truth of the matter is, I actually happen to believe that God gave you this land. And people will look at me funny when they say that, but I believe in the Creator. Just because I'm a native person with native spirituality doesn't mean that I all of a sudden have no brain. I mean, I came here and I walked around and saw this place. I mean, it's pretty clear somebody's helping you out. So, I mean, you've got this beautiful place and you've got this identity, and there's a lot of people that don't want you to have that, right? There are a lot of people that really would prefer that you would just go away. So one of the things that the last thing I'm going to kind of try and leave you with is that don't let them do that. Don't let somebody else define who you are. Don't sit there and think to yourself, okay, there is this white colonized view that my people are only a religion, because you're not. You have all of these different things that make you Jewish. And all of these different things that combine to make you Jewish are the same things that you should be trying to protect, right? Because it has nothing to do with, like if you wake up, if you do Shabbat once a month, or if you do Shabbat all the time. That's not what makes you who you are. What makes you who you are is where you came from and how you developed into a people. Every Jewish person that I know is concerned with making the world better. And except for Dick Silverstein, But truthfully, like people are getting involved. They like. Okay, so my community, we actually made hampers for people. We made Christmas hampers. I know that sounds really funny, Jewish people at Christmas, but we actually put together these hampers with food. We took them to the reserve, and we took them to all these different families that were poor, like they had very little. All the people that showed up, there was about 20 people that showed up to help, and I'd say 17 of them at least were Jewish. None of them, the funniest part was they didn't walk around patting themselves on the back and say, here's this Christmas hamper, we're Jewish. No, they literally, they spent the whole day driving, and I mean, like, the reserve is not close to the city in Calgary. We went to Siksika, which is quite a ways away. But a couple of them did wear IDF shirts. A couple of them maybe wore a little Morgan David, right? About a month after we did all that, some of my friends called me and they were like, that was really awesome what you guys did. Were those people Jewish? And I was like, yeah, those are some of my friends from Calgary United with Israel. Those are really nice people. You should invite them out here next time we have a powwow. Right? And all of a sudden you have the relationship built, right? So anyways, that's kind of, the long meandering journey of Ryan. But it's been an interesting journey. It's not nearly over yet. I mean, there's going to be a lot more interesting things to come, I think. The main thing, I think, is that we're going to keep making changes. I mean, I told my friend Sarah, she's in Calgary, and she might be watching this right now. When we started doing this, I said, look, everybody's afraid that we're going to rock the boat, right? And I said, well, we're not going to rock the boat. We're going to tip that son of a bitch over, and then we're going to build a new boat, right? And that boat is a boat that I'm going to be having a good time on. So I really do hope that, maybe you might not have liked much of what I said, or maybe you liked some of it, maybe you didn't like any of it. But I hope that when you get out there and you guys start seeing all this other stuff, you remember maybe even just a few things that I said tonight. So that's it. So I'll open it up to questions. Sure.
I'm actually from Canada, and
Sure.
And I spent some time on the reserves just with business, and so I kind of get a lot of time in Alberta.
Okay.
And it's colder. Of course, one would have been.
Yeah.
So and there is discrimination against Indian people and Aboriginals in Canada, but the Jewish people have this special gift that God gave us called anti-Semitism. And I don't see that discrimination anywhere else with any other nation, any other culture in the history of mankind. We got that special gift from God. So what's your take on anti-Semitism?
Okay, well, you didn't ask an easy question. Okay, so, wow. No, it's funny because I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, right? So, here's my take on it. And it might not be right. I mean, I'm right a lot, but this might not be right. So I'm just gonna throw it out there for you. I think the problem with Jews is that you didn't submit, right? If the entire culture, the entire overarching dominant culture, and it's all based on a culture of dominance, it relies on the fact that everybody thinks that, okay, there's this pyramid, and at the very apex is white people, and then there's, everything else on the bottom, and it just kind of slowly works its way down. And then all of a sudden there's these people called Jews. And these people called Jews, well, sometimes they're pale-skinned and they get pretty close to the top of the pyramid, but every time they get close to the top of the pyramid, somebody knocks them back down, right? The problem is that those Jews don't quite fit. They don't believe everything that the overarching culture believes, and yet somehow they manage to find a way to be fairly successful within that pyramid, and yet they don't really believe everything. So what that does is, in the minds of the people of the overarching culture, it starts cracking the foundations. Because listen, if the whole thing is built on the idea that we know better and that our way is best, and all of a sudden you have these really annoying people who just do their own thing and they don't listen, and they, not only do they do their own thing and they don't listen, they are very clearly not gonna change, and they'll tell you, yeah, no, we're good. What's gonna happen? All of a sudden everybody here starts questioning, and when everybody starts questioning, then you have revolts, you have revolutions. So what's the easiest way to deal with that? Oh, well, no, we're still perfect. Those guys are really terrible. Oh, but wait a minute, they're doing really well. They're successful. They're making all kinds of good things happen. Yeah, but they're really terrible because they're not just like us. And if they're not just like us, they gotta be really bad. And I honestly think that there's a huge element of that in anti-Semitism. The whole point is, it's not that you're bad people. The point is that if you aren't bad people, then everything else is screwed. Because then why aren't we Jews? Because if you're doing really well and the overarching culture isn't, well, all of a sudden then you got to start questioning the overarching culture. So it's much easier for the overarching culture to just make you a scapegoat. And to be honest, that's one of the reasons why I think it's, for my people, you guys you're a hell of an example. I mean, you didn't let somebody else steal your language. I mean, after how many thousands of years you brought it back? I mean, your method of spirituality, right, kind of kept you all together for 2,000 years while you're in exile. And I mean, then you got your land back, and all of a sudden, maybe there's people that don't worry about that nearly as much, but the thing is, that's still the glue, right? That still kept you together as a people. It wasn't, I mean, let's be honest, it wasn't your nationality, because you didn't have a nation. Like, your Jewish nation was in exile. So, I mean, if we're going to talk about anti-Semitism, I would say a large part of anti-Semitism comes maybe even from jealousy, right? They see people doing well. They're not doing well in the same way that we do well. And if we look at them, maybe we think that they're wrong and we're right. So if they're wrong and we're right, then they have to be bad because they're doing well. They must be cheating. Sorry.
That was a good explanation, but in that case, how do you explain why in America most of the minority groups side with the Palestinians and not with the Jews?
Well, that's actually really easy, because they're stupid. No, I'm serious. What I learned when I was a kid is that knowledge actually is power, right? My dad, he drilled that into my head as a kid. He's like, look, if you're a dumbass, people can convince you of anything because you have no knowledge, you have no way to refute it, and stupid people follow. That's what stupid people do. So you end up with this sad thing where people, instead of educating themselves, which is relatively easy, we live in the age of information. Like, Anybody in this room right now has more access with a device like that to information than the rest of the world combined in written history. Like, think about that for a second. Anything you want to know, 15 seconds, you have it, right? So if you remain ignorant by choice. And to remain ignorant by choice is the definition of stupid. So, I mean, and I'm not saying, the sad thing is some of those people are very educated. Some of those people are actually, they do it because they feel, you know. But here's the thing. If you remain purposefully obtuse, you're stupid. At the end of the day, I have no other explanation. And we can talk about the 40 years of false narratives, but I mean, again, I was exposed to that stuff, and I don't walk around with a Palestinian flag and a keffiyeh. I mean, I figured that shit out. It's not rocket science. I mean, you're an indigenous people, I'm an indigenous people. Why would I side with a colonizer against another indigenous people if all I have to do to find out that they're indigenous is open Google? You know, sorry, I get kind of annoyed because not at you and not at your question, but this is something that actually genuinely pisses me off because it makes all Native people look stupid. It makes, and we hate looking stupid. There's nothing worse than somebody saying, hey, you didn't know that? And it's something really obvious. Like, for how long did I talk to Jewish people about this stuff and they would look at me like, we're not indigenous. And it's like, no, you absolutely are. Like, I'm not making this stuff up. I've actually done some research. So, sorry, I didn't mean to segue there. Any other questions?
Also fellow Canadian, but from Toronto.
Okay.
More,
so not really Canadian.
Not really. Pseudo-American. Anyway, but I come from a more legal background, and you mentioned self-determination, and as an indigenous people, we have a right to self-determination here.
Yeah.
But then how would you deal with the issue of the Palestinians and their rights to self-determination? Certainly from a legal standpoint, and they just happen to be there in the meantime, at least in Judea and Samaria.
Yeah. Okay, so that's actually not as difficult to deal with as you might think. Because, so when I talk about indigenous rights, everything I talked about tonight, I hope you guys didn't take that as, Jews have all the rights and Palestinians have none. Because that's not what it means. What it means is that you have rights of indigenous status. They have rights of long-standing presence. And there is actually a hierarchy of rights. Now, in the hierarchy of rights, and so people don't like this when I say this, and I'll tell you right now, all the human rights hippies at home are freaking out. But the truth of the matter is, indigenous rights, especially in the modern day, are respected a lot more than rights of long-standing presence. If you lived somewhere for a long time, that doesn't grant you the same rights as somebody that's lived there for a really long time and has ancestral ties to those lands. Now, you don't have to kick them out, and there's a little bit of leeway here, because they have the right to live there in peace. They don't have the right to oppress you. They have the right to live there and have self-determination insofar as that self-determination doesn't infringe on your rights to live on your ancestral land in peace with self-determination. If they can't do that, and sadly right now the evidence seems to suggest that they can't, at that point you need to look for different solutions. And I guess the nice way to say it is, I was interviewed once and they asked me, like, how would you deal with the Palestinian issue in Israel? And I said, once. At the end of the day, like, you have to remember, even you, like Jewish people, ask yourselves one question. And I'm not talking about like the Jews of the diaspora, or like, the office Jews from Europe in the 1920s. Ask yourselves how the Jews in the old days would have dealt with something like this. How would the Maccabees have dealt with these guys, right? How would Simon Bar Kokhba, do you think he would drive his car every day and let people throw rocks at him? I mean, this is something that you have to decide. This is your Jewish identity. It's not my Jewish identity. I'm not Jewish. But I know, just from reading, that the old biblical Jews, they would have got biblical on those guys. It wouldn't be pretty. So, I mean, if you want to start talking about law and legality and stuff like that, well, let's talk about law and legality. You have more right to Judea and Samaria than the Arabs do. You have rights that date back to San Remo. You have rights that date back to the Balfour Declaration. And if we're going to talk about treaties, those treaties, if you read the treaties very carefully, and believe me, I know a little bit about treaties, what do those treaties say? They say that that's the ancestral homeland of the Jews, and that it was supposed to be given to you to make a state, right? So all this crap that I read in the media, that's one of the other reasons I got involved with this, is I read this crap in the media, and especially like the worst is when I read it in Jewish media, and they talk about the settlements, and I'm like, okay, but that's Jewish ancestral land, and it's actually in the treaty that it's theirs, so it is legal. So, sorry, that's one of my pet peeves. Any other questions?
Ryan,
Yeah.
you were talking about this boat you want to build and this boat that you want to whatever. Can you talk about like what can we change? What do you think? How can we tweak the message, or to some of us who are active on social media and that kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest problem that I have with pro-Israel advocacy is that it's really apologetic, right? Like even the word hasbarah, right? I don't speak Hebrew, but I know that word means explanation. Now, the very definition of that is that if you're explaining something, you're already on the defensive, right? You're already pretty much acknowledging that your position needs to be defended. My position is very different. My position is to hell with that. It's a celebration. Like, you have to celebrate your story. You tell your story in a celebratory way. You go on the offensive. So like when one of them comes to me and starts spouting their nonsense, and 99% of the time it is nonsense, I won't refute them point by point. I'll go on the offensive. So they'll start talking to me about stuff, and I'll be like, so how about Palestinian human rights? Why don't we talk about that? Why don't we talk about the fact that it's actually child abuse for you to bring a child to a riot? You know, I was in Hebron, my last trip, and I watched they call it the Friday afternoon riots. Yeah. They every Friday afternoon they start freaking out and throwing rocks and acting like idiots. And I was up on the hill, and I decided, I'm gonna walk down there and take a look. The first thing I see are these people throwing rocks at a where the checkpoint is, where the soldiers are, and I see this woman come wheeling through with a stroller. And I'm literally thinking to myself, what the hell is she doing?
She doesn't care if they could die.
That's exactly, right? Like, if you don't care about your own child to the point where you're using your child as propaganda, because that's all that could possibly be, there's an issue. And it's not your issue, it's their issue. So, I mean, later on in my trip to Hebron, I had another experience where, and this goes back to the Hasbara stuff again. I went on this tour with an Arab. I snuck over to the other side and went on a tour, and with some Danish kids. It was interesting. And the guy was telling lies the entire tour. Like he talked about how the little, I asked him point blank, I'm like, so no Jews lived here? Because he's like, no, this is never a Jewish city. And I'm like, biblical capital of King David, so anyways, I was kind of muttering that. And some of the Danish kids were laughing because they heard me mocking him, right? But he's like, these little squares, he goes, these are because the Arabs that lived here wanted the Jews to think the Jews lived here so they wouldn't steal their houses. And I'm literally like, come on, man. So I let him keep bullshitting a little bit, and then we finishing the tour, and there's this one crossing, and it's just off Shahada Street, and he's walking in front of the tour. He turns around, and I'll never forget this. This is to me like the quintessential Israel Arab bullshit story. And he turns and he goes, just last week there was a baby crawling in this shit. He looks at me and he knows he's not going to like the question. So he turns and he looks at me, and I'm like, why was there a baby crawling across the road? And he's just like, no, my friend, I'm telling you. And I'm like, yeah, but I think you're telling me lies. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I was like, I don't know about you guys, but where I'm from, when I cross the road, I pick my baby up. But they were Danish kids, like, college kids, and they were eating this shit up. They were literally standing. Let's look at it. I know I got to wrap up real quick, so I'll just say this. I'm pretty pale. My mom was Norwegian, and they're like the whitest people on earth, right? They are super white. I have green eyes. When I was growing up, I had blonde hair, and I actually had darker skin when I was a kid. But I'm an Indian, right? I'm an Indian because my dad's an Indian, his dad was an Indian, his dad's dad was an Indian. I don't really care that the government of Canada, until just only recently decided, hey, that guy's an Indian. Like, literally, it took the government of Canada until like a couple months ago to decide that, yeah, Ryan Bellerose is an Indian. I don't give a shit. The Canadian government doesn't define me. I define me. My family defines me. So, anyways, thank you guys all for coming.
Okay, So first of all, I'd like to thank Ryan for joining us. I've got to tell you that, I mean, Ryan's got a very full-on schedule. You might not even realise it. I mean, it's true. And I asked Ryan, just on the top of my head, look, would you like to speak to my community and, anyone that would like to travel? And without, within a second, he said, yeah, I would love to do it. And I think you can just see it in the way that Ryan talks. He's not going through the motions here. He doesn't have any notes. It's not rehearsed. It's all coming from his heart. And I think that on a personal level, I mean, first of all, I really appreciate having you as a friend and a friend of all of us. But I find that Ryan's just the raw part of his message, it's just the way it's coming from the heart. It's the kick up the backside we all need, I think. And I think whether you agree with everything he said or not, I mean, I agree with everything that he said. And I'm standing right next to him. I think we can all just appreciate what he's saying and take something away and appreciate the friendship that he gives us. So thank you, Ryan. I'd also like to thank Debbie and Etzchaim for providing the facilities tonight. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Just one more thing, this was free of charge. I'm going to leave this cup here. If anyone does want to contribute a little bit for Ryan's cost, then that's appreciated, but totally optional. Thank you.